There was a time on Earth when dinosaurs weren't even a glimmer in the future. The world belonged to different masters. Imagine forests crawling with insects the size of a crocodile. Today, you will learn about several creatures from that era. And these are some of the most terrifying beings you could possibly imagine. But at the end, we will expose one major deception. A scientific fact the entire world believed for a long, long time. Ready to learn the truth? That was the wild and unbelievable world of the past. Now, we are moving on to a true heavyweight. We are talking about a creature that would turn a walk in a dark forest into a nightmare for any of us. Meet the Arthropleura. Imagine you are standing in a forest during the Carboniferous Period. Suddenly, you hear a strange sound. It isn't a roar or a howl. It is a rhythmic, heavy drumming, like a machine approaching. The ground beneath your feet begins to tremble. Out of the thick fog, a giant emerges. Arthropleura is the largest land-dwelling invertebrate in the history of our planet. Picture a common millipede you might find in your garden under a rock. Now, scale it up to the size of a limousine. In length, it reached almost 9 feet. If you stood it up vertically, it would tower over a professional basketball player. It was nearly 2 feet wide, a living, flat tank. Its entire body was covered in heavy armor. About 30 hard, interlocking plates protected its back. This shell glistened in the forest gloom and was incredibly tough. Underneath that armor were around 60 legs. Imagine 60 legs moving in perfect synchronization, carrying that heavy body forward with terrifying speed. How did it get so big? It was all thanks to the atmosphere. 300 million years ago, oxygen levels on Earth were much higher than they are today, about 35% compared to our current 21%. Insects and millipedes don't use lungs. They breathe through tubes in their bodies. This oxygen acted like superfuel, allowing them to grow to the size of movie monsters. Now let's consider a scenario that many people love to debate. Suppose a time machine transported a group of 10 strong modern men into this ancient forest. They have no guns, only what they can find on the ground: heavy sticks, large rocks, or wooden clubs. Suddenly, they come face to face with an angry Arthropleura. Could 10 humans defeat this single giant bug? The answer is terrifying. The humans wouldn't stand a chance. They would all perish. Here is why. First, there is the armor. Hitting Arthropleura with a wooden club would be like hitting a massive tractor tire with a baseball bat. You would simply hurt your hands. Its exoskeleton was designed by evolution to withstand falling trees. A human strike would feel like nothing more than a tap to this creature. Second, there is mass and physics. Arthropleura weighed hundreds of pounds. It wouldn't try to fence with the humans or bite them immediately. It would simply charge. Imagine a chaotic, armored motorcycle crashing into a crowd. It would knock the people over like bowling pins. Once they were on the ground, the battle would be over. Its countless legs, gripping the soil, would trample them instantly. The group would be crushed by the sheer raw power of this ancient giant in a matter of minutes. Was this creature the king of the world? Did it have any enemies? In the sky above, giant dragonflies, called Meganeura, patrolled the air. They were the size of eagles. But for Arthropleura, they were no more dangerous than a housefly. A dragonfly simply couldn't pierce that thick armor. On the ground, there were giant scorpions the size of dogs. They had venomous stingers, but even they were lighter and less protected than our giant millipede. If they met on a path, the scorpion would likely move out of the way. The only things that could kill it were nature and water. Arthropleura lived on land. If it fell into a deep swamp, it could drown. There, giant amphibians resembling crocodiles might flip it over and attack its soft underbelly. But as long as Arthropleura stayed on solid ground, it had no enemies. Beasts would scatter in fear when they heard it crashing through the undergrowth. Scientists have examined fossils containing stomach contents and they were shocked. Inside this monster, they found only fern spores, moss, and wood fragments. Arthropleura was completely peaceful. It had no need to kill anyone. Why the heavy armor? To stop predators from interrupting its lunch. Why the massive jaws? To crack open the tough bark of ancient trees. So, if that group of 10 humans we mentioned earlier had simply stood still and dropped their sticks, Arthropleura wouldn't have even looked at them. It would have just crawled past, rustling its many legs, on its way to find the most delicious rotting log in the forest. That is the irony of the Carboniferous period. The king of terror was actually just a gigantic forest cow. Let's transport ourselves to the dense forest of the Carboniferous period. Here, you need to watch your step very carefully, because hiding in the shadows of the ferns is a creature that scares us on an instinctive level, even in its modern, tiny form. Meet the Pulmonoscorpius. Its name translates as the breathing scorpion. It was one of the first scorpions in history to become a true king of the land. Imagine a regular black scorpion, then scale it up to the size of a large, well-fed house cat. It reached a length of about 28 inches, 70 centimeters. If such a pet crawled into your tent, it would take up the entire sleeping bag. But the real intrigue here isn't the size, but its lethality. Biologists have a golden rule of scorpions that still works today. It goes like this. Look at the claws. If they are huge and thick like a crab's, the venom is likely weak. The scorpion relies on muscle power. But if the claws are small, thin, and slender like tweezers, run. It means nature put all its evolution points into chemical warfare, not muscles. Pulmonoscorpius had surprisingly small claws, but a thick, muscular tail. This implies one thing. This monster was a walking factory of deadly neurotoxin. Another detail sets it apart from its modern, blind cousins. Scientists found it had huge compound eyes, like those of a fly or dragonfly. This is a terrifying fact. It didn't hide in the dark. It was a daytime hunter that could clearly see you from a distance under the bright sun. Now let's imagine a group of 10 humans accidentally stumbling upon this predator on a narrow path. Unlike clumsy beetles, a scorpion is a special forces soldier. In a fight, it would be lightning fast. The stinger on its tail was the size of a large nail. It would easily pierce through jeans and a jacket. The dose of venom would be so massive that a person would collapse in convulsions within a minute in agonizing pain. Would the humans win? Yes, we are heavier, and one lucky hit with a heavy rock to the head would decide the battle. But it would be an expensive victory. Most likely, 1 or 2 people from the group would be left on the path forever. An interesting fact, fossils of this monster were found in Scotland. It is cold and rainy there now, but 330 million years ago, that land was on the equator, a true tropical paradise. It disappeared when oxygen levels dropped, and its lungs could no longer support its giant body. But Pulmonoscorpius proved a point. Size matters, but weapons matter more. It was smaller than other giants of that era, but thanks to its venom and perfect vision, it was the ultimate killer. The next creature is probably one of the last beings you would ever want to meet in the wild. And in a moment, you will understand why. Because we are looking at the most gigantic, venomous, and incredibly dangerous spider in the history of our planet. Now, you will find out who this monster hunted, who hunted it, and why the story of its discovery is like a real detective novel. Meet the Megarachne. Its name translates from Greek very simply, the Great Spider. Let's first look at this monster the way scientists and terrified dinosaur fans looked at it for 25 years. The first thing that shocks you is the size. Imagine a spider the size of a large dog. The distance between the tips of its legs reached 21 inches, 54 centimeters. To help you visualize this scale, look at the wheel of a regular adult bicycle or a large family-size pizza. That is how much space Megarachne took up just by sitting on the ground. It was a truly hairy giant. For a long time, it was a superstar of paleontology. It was listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the largest spider of all time. It was featured in documentaries, hissing and attacking early reptiles. How did such a giant live? Scientists immediately realized that spinning a web was useless for it. The threads simply wouldn't hold the weight of such a massive body, and it would take too much energy to produce. Therefore, Megarachne was considered an active hunter. This wasn't the kind of spider that sits in a corner. It was a roaming assassin. Imagine, it ran through the forest, and it did so frighteningly fast. It didn't wait for prey, it chased it down, relying on its long legs and the element of surprise. Its main weapons were thought to be huge chelicerae, fang jaws that looked like folding knives. Scientists were convinced that such a giant must have incredibly potent venom. Most likely, it was a neurotoxin that paralyzed the victim in seconds. This was necessary so the prey wouldn't fight back and damage the spider's soft abdomen. What did it hunt? Its appetite was serious. Its menu included large, fat cockroaches of that era, other arachnids, and most terrifyingly, early small reptiles. Imagine a lizard the size of a cat becoming lunch itself. Megarachne was the terror of the undergrowth. But was it at the top of the food chain? No. Even such a king had enemies. Megarachne tried to stay away from the water. In the swamps lived giant amphibians that looked like crocodiles. For them, a soft, juicy spider was just an easy snack. Therefore, Megarachne always hid in the thick ferns. But now, here is the most interesting part. Everything I just told you about the venom, the running through the forest, the title of the largest spider. All of this is the greatest mistake in the history of paleontology. How could scientists get it so wrong? Here begins the real detective story. The fossil was found in 1980 in Argentina. A paleontologist saw a round body and sprawling legs in the stone. He was so sure he had found a giant spider that the discovery became a global sensation. But then something strange happened. The owner of the land where the stone was found realized it was a treasure. He took the fossil and hid it in a bank vault, just like a gold bar or diamonds. You won't believe it, but for 25 years, other scientists couldn't study the original. The entire scientific world built theories based on just one blurry photograph and a plaster cast. The legend of the monster took on a life of its own, growing with terrifying details that people simply invented. The mystery was revealed only in 2005. A group of paleontologists finally gained access to that safe. At the same time, they were lucky enough to find a second, more complete skeleton of this creature. They began painstaking work, clearing away the rock millimeter by millimeter. And when they uncovered the parts of the body that had been hidden under the stone, they were speechless. The spider had no venom glands. It had no spinnerets for webs. Instead, it had a long segmented tail and strange wide paddles on its legs. Megarachne was never a spider. What was it? It turned out to be a eurypterid, or sea scorpion. Megarachne was crossed out of the Guinness Book of World Records, and the title of the largest spider returned to the Goliath bird eater, which lives today. This story teaches us the main thing. Fear has big eyes. We looked at a rock and saw a nightmare monster, but hiding there was just a harmless mudlover who wanted only one thing: to be left alone. So, what do you think was the most frightening creature from today's video? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one and use them to choose new topics. Your like is the best way to support the channel. Thanks for watching.